Hey there, wonderful listeners. Welcome back to Grandma's Real Stories. If you're just tuning in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a follow, and drop a comment below. It really helps us keep these stories alive. Today, we're cracking open a family secret that lay hidden for decades, tucked away in the forgotten pages of an old diary. Imagine a life brutally rerouted, a dream shattered by the very people who should have nurtured it. This is the story of choices made, dreams denied, and the heartbreaking price of hidden control. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Every dusty corner holds a story, but some, I've learned, conceal a heartache so profound it can ripple through generations. For me, that corner was Aunt Beatrice's attic, a place I'd always viewed as a forgotten archive of trinkets, until one summer day, it became the silent keeper of a shattered dream. The humid afternoon air in the attic was thick with the scent of aged paper and forgotten wood. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing through grimy windows. Aunt Beatrice, with her usual brisk efficiency, was overseeing a chaotic spring clean. My cousin Leo and I, reluctantly, were drafted into the task. Our job, clear out a formidable stack of old trunks and boxes. Honestly, Aurora, I thought this attic was just a graveyard of mismatched socks and moth-eaten blankets. Leo grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow, a hint of playful defiance in his voice. I just smiled, already lost in the quiet romance of old things. I loved the tangible echoes of the past, the way objects held whispers of lives lived. Aunt Beatrice, a woman of sharp practicality, viewed it all as mere clutter. Nonsense, Leo. Every item tells a story if you only bothered to listen. Now focus, we have until dinner. Her voice, usually a command, held a rare, almost wistful quality as she pointed to a particularly heavy, leather-bound box tucked beneath a stack of faded quilts. It was larger than the others, almost like a miniature treasure chest. This one belonged to your Great-Aunt Clara. I haven't seen it opened in decades. Her words, usually so direct, trailed off, a profound melancholy replacing her brisk tone. I'd seen it before, this fleeting shadow. It was the way she'd mention certain periods of Clara's youth, then abruptly change the subject or sigh deeply. A silence. Not a loud silence, but a subtle, recurring absence, like a note missing from a familiar melody. It was the way Great-Aunt Clara, known for her later years of quiet resignation, was never described with the vibrant passion I sensed from other old photographs. My fingers brushed the cool leather of the box. It was surprisingly heavy, filled with something more than just clothes. Inside, nestled amongst dried lavender and yellowed lace, lay a collection of meticulously pressed wildflowers, and beneath them, a small, worn, leather-bound diary. Its cover was smooth and dark from years of dedicated handling, practically humming with untold stories. This was my mini-hook, an object brimming with potential secrets, connected to a woman whose youthful fire seemed to have mysteriously vanished. A diary, Aunt Beatrice. Great-Aunt Clara kept a diary. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Aunt Beatrice's hands, which moments ago moved with such calm precision polishing silver, froze. The polishing cloth fell silently to the floor. Her gaze, usually so open and direct, clouded over for a fleeting moment. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her, a ripple disturbing the otherwise placid surface. Oh, that, an old keepsake, dear. From a long time ago. Such trivial things get kept, don't they? No importance. Her voice, usually so rich with detail, was suddenly distant, almost brittle. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. Was it profound sadness? Deep-seated fear? A quick, almost defensive glance at me. Then, a forced cheerfulness returned, like a shutter quickly closing over a window, abruptly cutting off the light. Are you going to help me sort these photos, dear? Or are you going to dwell on old forgotten trinkets all afternoon? I nodded slowly, a quiet acquiescence. But the intricate handkerchief and the swift, almost pained change in Aunt Beatrice's demeanor remained stubbornly fixed in my mind. That moment was a tiny, unsettling crack in the perfect facade of my Great-Aunt Clara's seemingly resigned past. It wasn't just old writings, it was a deliberate erasure. An unspoken question that began to echo in the quiet afternoon air, growing louder with each passing moment, compelling me to seek answers where I knew they wouldn't be easily found. The feeling wasn't malicious, but a deep, cold certainty that beneath the warmth of her stories lay something fragile, something she desperately guarded. This diary wasn't merely a record of daily life. It was a silent testament to a truth the family couldn't speak, pushing me towards the next step in uncovering a dream buried long ago. The old silk handkerchief, innocent as it appeared, felt like a burning coal in my hand that night. It wasn't just fabric, it was a silent accusation, a physical tether to a secret Great-Aunt Clara had desperately tried to keep buried. Sleep felt like a distant shore. The question about the embroidered handkerchief and its mysterious owner, Evelyn Thorne, spun endlessly in my mind. It was a tiny stone thrown into the still pond of my grandmother's past, and the ripples were starting to spread, disturbing everything. The feeling was almost magnetic, pulling me back to my laptop, a digital detective on a quiet, personal quest. The dim glow of my reading lamp felt like a portal, a secret window into a life abruptly altered. The image of the handkerchief, with its intricate initials, haunted me. Its delicate beauty seemed to plead for its story to be heard, for its true connection to be revealed. A nagging curiosity, a sense of something unfinished, compelled me to open the journal. My fingers trembled as I turned the brittle, yellowed pages, a frantic energy building inside. Hours melted away in the silent glow of the lamp, each sentence a step deeper into the past. The early entries were exactly as Aunt Beatrice described, pure, vibrant joy. Clara wrote of her dreams of becoming a botanist, her passion for exploring wild landscapes, sketching rare flora. She spoke of her independence, her fierce love for nature, and her plans to study abroad. My heart swelled with admiration for this fiery, ambitious young woman I barely knew. This was the mini hook, painting a picture of a dynamic Clara starkly different from the quiet figure she became. Then, the twist, a chilling discovery. Abruptly, almost violently, the tone of the diary shifted. The lively prose withered, replaced by short, increasingly melancholic entries. References to my studies and my botanical journey vanished. Instead, phrases like the crushing weight of expectation, a heart confined, and the bitter taste of a choice made for me began to appear. Evelyn Thorne's name was never mentioned, but the vibrant green dress and the initials E.T. On the handkerchief, those subtle hints now screamed with a new horrifying context. The entry that pierced me the most read, "They say it is for my own good, for the family's standing. But what of my soul? My dreams withered like pressed flowers. It was vague, frustratingly so, lacking names or explicit details about who they were. But the instinct, sharp and undeniable, screamed at me. This wasn't a choice. There was so much more to this story, a vibrant future deliberately stolen. A cold suspicion began to solidify, turning my blood to ice. If Clara was so passionate, so ambitious, why the sudden, devastating shift? Why the deep, unspoken sadness that followed her for decades? The innocent image of my quiet great-aunt now felt tainted, poisoned by this grim revelation. A chilling undercurrent of something deeply, irrevocably wrong, something that felt like a profound personal sacrifice forced upon her, began to churn within me. This wasn't just history. This was a personal tragedy unfolding, and I knew, with a growing sense of urgency, that I was only at the beginning of uncovering the painful truth. My fingers hovered over the pages, now desperately searching for more, the next clue beckoning from the lines of vanished dreams. Clara's forced silence resonated like a scream across the decades. The weight of Clara's diary, now open on my lap, felt like a literal stone in my gut the next morning. The vibrant colors of my family's breakfast table seemed to mock the gray despair bleeding from the pages. This wasn't just about lost dreams. It was about the chilling possibility of a life deliberately suffocated, a future stolen by the very people who claimed to love her. I knew I had to talk to Aunt Beatrice, but the dread of breaking her carefully constructed peace was immense. Aunt Beatrice, I read some of Great-Aunt Clara's diary. My voice, though firm, trembled as I approached her in the kitchen, the diary clutched in my hands like a live wire. Her humming stopped abruptly. The spatula clattered to the tiled floor, a jarring sound in the sudden quiet. She turned slowly, her eyes, usually so warm, widening slightly as she saw the diary. A flicker of raw, undisguised terror crossed her face before she could mask it, a sight that made my stomach churn. The diary. "Oh, Aurora, I told you that's just sentimental ramblings. Nothing important. Put it away, dear. It's too personal." Her voice was forced, a desperate, almost frantic attempt to cling to the comfortable veneer of normalcy. But the warmth was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle quality, a voice on the verge of snapping. I knew this was it. This was the moment I had to push to crack open the vault of her secrets, no matter how agonizing the truth. "It's not ramblings, Aunt Beatrice." Clara wrote about her dreams, her studies. Then it changes. She wrote about a choice made for me, about her soul withered. What happened to her dreams? Who took them away? The words hung in the air, a bell tolling a forgotten memory, a final judgment. Aunt Beatrice's face drained of all color, turning a ghastly ashen. Her hand flew to her mouth, trembling violently, a silent scream of pure, unadulterated recognition and despair. Her dreams, oh, that was a long time ago, Aurora. A very difficult time for our family. Some things are better left undisturbed, buried, for the family's sake. You don't understand the pressures back then. Her voice was barely a breath, filled with a plea to let the past lie, a desperate attempt to protect us from a truth she couldn't bear to speak. But I couldn't, not anymore. The discovery of Clara's shattered spirit had changed everything. The silence was no longer protection, it was complicity. But it involves our family, doesn't it? Who forced her to give up her dreams, Aunt Beatrice? Who took away her future? The question hung heavy in the air, a direct challenge to the carefully constructed narrative of our family's past. This was the moment of truth, the twist in this family drama. Aunt Beatrice slowly turned back, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, a silent torrent of pain finally breaking free. A furious battle raged in her gaze, a desperate, lifelong need to protect her family's image, warring with an overwhelming, crushing burden of guilt that had finally become too heavy to bear. Her face contorted, a mask of pure agony. It was agonizing to watch. It was your great-grandparents, Aurora, my parents, Clara's parents. They found out about her plans to study, and about Elias, her sweetheart. He wasn't from our world. No money, no connections. He was a musician, a free spirit. And Clara, she wanted to leave to study in Europe with him. My parents, they were terrified. Terrified of the scandal, of losing their social standing. They said she was shaming us. They locked her away, Aurora, in the very attic where you found that diary, for weeks, until she broke. They threatened Elias' family, threatened to ruin his reputation, his career. They forced her to write the letter, breaking it off with him. They destroyed her dreams, her love. They said it was for her own good, for the family's honor. I had to keep silent. I saw it all. I lost my sister's true self, her happiness, because of our parents' cruelty and their obsession with appearances. And I couldn't do anything to stop it. I was a coward. I've lived with that shame every single day. Her words were torn from her, ragged with emotion, each syllable a fresh wound. She wasn't just admitting something, she was reliving every agonizing moment right there in front of me. The casual dismissal of sentimental ramblings couldn't hide the deep, guttural agony in her voice. Great-grandparents, our beloved, proper great-grandparents, they locked her away, destroyed her love because of social status. And you lived with that truth for decades? My voice, though calm, held an edge of raw, uncontained accusation I couldn't hide. It was a statement, not a question. A bitter truth acknowledged, a legacy of hypocrisy exposed. What else was I supposed to do? Our parents, their reputation, our family's standing, it would have been ruined. Elias, he was vulnerable. They made me promise, they made it clear. I truly thought I was doing what was right. To protect everyone, to prevent further harm. I cried, Aurora, every day for years. The guilt, it has eaten at me every single day. I lost my sister's true self, and I couldn't do anything. She looked up, her eyes pleading, full of an ancient anguish that stretched back decades, an ocean of unshed tears. Her desperation was palpable. I could almost see the young Beatrice, trapped by the rigid societal norms and the iron will of her parents, forced to witness the destruction of her sister's soul. It was a heartbreaking glimpse into the impossible choices people make out of fear and misguided loyalty. The silence in the kitchen was now thick, heavy with the weight of generations of unspoken pain, a legacy of control and shattered dreams that had poisoned the roots of our family. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the raw emotion that had just been unleashed, leaving us both exposed and vulnerable. This wasn't just Clara's secret anymore. It was ours, now inextricably linked to the controlling, prejudiced heart of our own family tree, and the path ahead was now agonizingly clear, to confront the very foundation of who we thought we were. The attic wasn't just a storage space. It was a tomb of buried dreams, and we had just unearthed the haunting. The chilling confession about Clara's forced confinement and the cruel destruction of her dreams by our great-grandparents hung in the air, a poisonous shroud. The image of our beloved, proper ancestors, now stained by such monstrous acts of control and social tyranny, ripped open a gaping wound in our perception of the family. This wasn't just hidden history. This was a crime, a profound injustice that demanded reckoning. I felt a burning anger, a fierce need to rip through the polite veneer of our family's past and expose every ugly truth. But how do you prosecute ghosts? How do you fight the pervasive, insidious ghost of control and outdated societal rules that still lingered? My personal quest now felt less like a search for a lost object and more like an investigation into a systemic, decades-old act of emotional imprisonment. The memory of Clara's vibrant, lost dreams, once confined to a diary, now burned with the weight of raw injustice. My focus shifted to finding undeniable proof of her confinement, the missing pieces that would fully expose great-grandparents, calculated actions, and hopefully reveal what became of Elias, her lost love. This was the mini-hook, the hunt for tangible, irrefutable evidence that would confirm the depth of the familial tyranny and the insidious power of outdated social norms. The journey led me to the darkest corners of old family legal documents, obscure private sanitarium records, because such things were often hidden under medical pretense, and even discreet inquiries within the most ancient, whispered circles of the elder community. It was like sifting through the dust of forgotten lives, each document, each hushed rumor, potentially holding a clue to Clara's hidden ordeal and Elias' fate. The imposing, almost intimidating facades of these old institutions seemed to sneer, guarding their secrets with an unyielding stoicism. Getting information from them was a nightmare. It was like pulling teeth from a concrete wall, every step met with bureaucratic resistance, evasive answers, and endless paperwork. Days bled into weeks of endless phone calls, navigating labyrinthine bureaucratic hurdles, and filling out mountains of tedious legal papers, each one a test of my dwindling patience and a slow, agonizing burn of frustration. The weight of the delay gnawed at me, a chilling fear that we might never uncover the full extent of this historical control and find a trace of Elias. Leo, with his pragmatic approach, became an invaluable ally, a stoic force against the bureaucratic tide. His composure stretched thin by the frustrating dead ends, but his determination only growing with each closed door and evasive answer. His quiet fury, a palpable force, became the engine of our progress, pushing us forward relentlessly, his frustration a silent roar, fueling his relentless pursuit of truth. Lily, her usual bubbly energy replaced by an almost frantic edge, her emotions raw and exposed, frayed by the endless delays, finally broke. "This is ridiculous. This is too much." She burst out one afternoon after another dead-end phone call, slamming the receiver down with a frustrated cry that bordered on a desperate wail. "They're making it impossible. Maybe Aunt Beatrice just misremembered how bad it was. Maybe there's nothing here, and we're just digging up ghosts that want to stay buried, embarrassing ourselves, wasting our time while we should be figuring out how to heal." Her words, though born of frustration, hit a raw nerve. Was it possible we were wrong? Was this all a painful misunderstanding, amplified by Aunt Beatrice's guilt? A seed of doubt, cold and sharp, began to sprout, threatening to take root. But the gut feeling, the raw, visceral emotion from Clara's diary, was too strong to ignore. We pushed on, fueled by a grim resolve. The tension in the air was palpable, a growing unease that this discovery, this truth, might not bring closure, but instead an even deeper chasm within our family. The search for Clara's paper trail became a tense race against time and fading memories, leading us to the chilling twist. Deep within the county asylum records, a single, faded admission form for a temporary stay due to nervous exhaustion, bearing Clara's name and her parents' signatures. And tucked within that file, a discarded, unsigned letter addressed to Elias, detailing Clara's forced renunciation of him and her dreams. It was irrefutable, undeniable proof of the depth of their control and their calculated cruelty. The loving facade of our great-grandparents wasn't just cracked, it was utterly shattered, revealing the prison they built for their own child. The discovery of that asylum admission form and Clara's unsigned letter to Elias sent a chill straight to my soul. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a screaming testament to my great-grandparents' calculated brutality, a chilling echo of the control that had suffocated Clara's vibrant spirit. The image of the benevolent, tradition-bound ancestors, so often idealized, shattered completely, replaced by the monstrous silhouette of figures who wielded their power to crush a daughter's dreams and spirit. This was our mini-hook, delving into the twisted logic of family tyranny. Driven by a mix of profound disgust and a desperate need for understanding, we dove deeper into my great-grandparents, personal histories, and the insidious societal norms of their era. We found old community records, personal letters, and even spoke to very elderly family friends who, hesitant at first, eventually whispered of the prevailing obsession with proper marriages, social standing, and preserving the family name at all costs. What we uncovered was a grim mosaic of ingrained expectations, a pathological fear of scandal, a fanatical obsession with maintaining appearances, and a rigid adherence to perceived class hierarchies. My great-grandparents, people of immense pride and chilling influence, truly believed they were acting for the good of their lineage, protecting their daughter Clara from what they saw as an unsuitable attachment to Elias, a penniless musician, and the shameful notion of a woman pursuing a scientific career. They saw Clara's independence and love as a direct threat, not to Alara's happiness, but to the family's untouchable place in society. It painted a picture of them not just as villains, but as chilling products of their time, consumed by the rigid expectations of their social circle, whose desperation to maintain status led to monstrous acts of emotional and psychological imprisonment. The twist came when we found an old, faded will draft dated years before Clara's breakdown, where she explicitly detailed her wishes for her botanical studies to be funded. It explicitly cut her off from the family fortune if she pursued unapproved paths. And tucked within that, an unsent letter from Elias to Clara, detailing a desperate plan to elope, showing his unwavering love. The parents had intercepted it. This wasn't merely social ostracization. It was a sophisticated, systemic campaign to break Clara's will and erase Elias from her life. The documents, chilling in their calm formality, spoke of necessary interventions and guiding a wayward child, revealing a deep, almost clinical coldness in their actions. They even mused about the necessity of protecting the family's investments in its future, viewing Clara's life as a commodity. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin escalated as the full scope of their calculated tyranny became horrifyingly clear. They hadn't just separated two lovers, they had actively engineered the destruction of their own daughter's spirit, her very identity, to uphold their own warped sense of honor and social standing, all under the guise of tough love. This revelation, colder than any legal document, ignited a searing, volcanic anger within me, a profound sense of betrayal not just for Clara, but for the fundamental values our family claimed to represent. How could people we revered, people Aunt Beatrice fiercely protected, be capable of such calculated, heartless cruelty, rooted in such suffocating control? The moral complexity of it gnawed at me, threatening to consume me. Understanding the societal context didn't excuse the actions. It just made the monsters more real, more human, and more terrifying. This wasn't just a narrative of individual villainy. It was a tragic, abhorrent dance of systemic control, misplaced pride, and devastating silence. The air in the room felt heavy, pregnant with the bitter taste of truth, leading us to the inevitable, raw confrontations that would shake the family's foundations to their very core. Our family's legacy wasn't just built on pride, it was built on a lie, cemented by a hidden act of crushing a soul. How do you confront a phantom, a pervasive, insidious force of control that lingered long after the hands that wielded it were dust? The sheer weight of great-grandparents, tyranny, now undeniable, threatened to crush us. We knew we couldn't bring them to justice directly, but the truth had to be spoken, acknowledged, and understood by those who still blindly revered their sanitized memory. This was the mini-hook, facing the invisible oppressor, the enduring, toxic power of past control and outdated societal rules, a confrontation with a legacy that had warped lives, not just a person. We decided to hold a special, solemn family meeting, inviting the oldest living relatives who remembered Clara and Elias' time, those who had lived through the era of proper appearances and strict social codes. The air in the room was thick with unspoken history, a heavy silence pregnant with unspoken guilt and denial, a stark contrast to the explosive truth we were about to drop. Then I spoke. My voice, though firm, trembled slightly as I began to recount the story, starting with Aunt Beatrice's tearful confession, the truth about Clara's dreams and Elias, and the brutal reality of their forced separation. As I described the meticulous records of Clara's confinement, the private journals detailing her parents' machinations, the unsigned letters to Elias, and the asylum admission form, faces, initially curious, twisted into expressions of profound confusion, then horror, then a raw, visceral anger. Lily's eyes welled up, reliving the initial pain of discovery. Leo stood silently beside me, his presence a rock of support, his gaze unwavering, reinforcing the chilling gravity of my words. The twist came not just from the documents, but from the faces of the elders. A few, initially in denial, began to crumble, their own long-suppressed memories of how things were done back, then slowly resurfacing. The carefully constructed image of the benevolent, proper great-grandparents shattered into a million pieces. The room erupted. Devastating shock gave way to volatile chaos. Elderly cousins, who had grown up admiring these ancestors, were utterly blindsided, some fiercely denying, screaming accusations, clinging to their fabricated memories. Others grappled openly with the horrifying implications, their faces contorted in a mix of grief and shame. This wasn't just a family secret. It was a direct assault on their understanding of their own lineage, their family's fundamental moral compass, forcing them to confront the inherent tyranny woven into their very identity. Accusations flew, not just about the great-grandparents, but about Aunt Beatrice's decades of silence, about the family members who had known or suspected and said nothing. Bitter divisions instantly formed, tearing at the very fabric of our seemingly united family. Tears flowed, not just of sorrow, but of anger, disillusionment, and a deep, soul-wrenching shame for the dreams that had been crushed. It was a brutal, raw spectacle of truth and its devastating aftermath, the deepest wounds of inherited control exposed for all to see. For some, there was immediate, fierce denial, an almost pathological inability to accept such a dark truth about their revered ancestors, leading to angry walkouts. For others, the crushing weight of this knowledge brought a suffocating wave of shame and sadness, a gut-wrenching realization that their family's foundation was built, in part, on injustice, on the suffering of their own kin. The K-1ECBCH tin reached its peak as the legacy of control. Once hidden, now permeated every corner of the room, forcing each family member to confront their own complicity, their own privilege, and their own silence. There was no single confession from an oppressor. The oppressor was a system, a mindset, and the deep-seated fear of social judgment that allowed it to thrive. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was an exorcism of a collective blind spot, a brutal awakening that left us all breathless, reeling from the raw, exposed pain, knowing the next step was to navigate the profoundly fragmented reality of our new family history. The cost of hidden control wasn't just Clara's lost dreams. It was the slow, agonizing poisoning of our own family's soul, finally brought into the searing light. The raw truth, once confined to a dusty diary, had exploded like a bomb in our family. Aunt Beatrice's confession, irrevocably backed by our unearthed evidence of great-grandparents, calculated cruelty, created a devastating, visible fissure within our lineage. Bringing this shattered truth to the wider family was not just a revelation. It was an act of brutal, necessary honesty. The initial family meeting had left a somber, fragile quiet, but the true mini-hook was the aftermath. The lingering shock, the whispered arguments that turned into shouting matches, and the agonizing phone calls that followed, slowly, painstakingly, eroding any pretense of unity. There was no easy way to tell them that the sweet, unassuming Aunt Beatrice had carried such a profound, painful secret due to coercion, and that their revered great grandparents were directly responsible for a cruel act of emotional and social tyranny. Then, the full revelation unfolded across days and weeks, as information spread, distorted, and amplified by rumor, forcing every branch of the family tree to confront its own roots. My voice, firm but heavy with the weight of facts, patiently repeated the story. Clara's crushed dreams, her forced confinement, the destruction of her love with Elias, and the deep-seated social control that fueled her parents' actions. As the details solidified, faces twisted into expressions of disbelief, then horror, then often raw, bitter anger. Lily, fragile but resolute, helped answer questions, offering comfort where she could. Leo, ever the anchor of logic, provided calm, factual explanations, trying to ground the emotional storm. The twist came not in a single revelation, but in the multifaceted, unpredictable reaction of each family member. Devastating shock gave way to volatile chaos. Uncle Victor, burdened by his own past actions, struggled with the new truth about his grandparents, seeing echoes of misguided protection in his own life. Other elderly relatives who had lived through that era confessed their own vague suspicions or even quiet complicity, now haunted by their youthful silence, their faces etched with a profound, belated shame. Some vehemently denied the allegations, clinging desperately to the idealized image of their ancestors, creating fierce, bitter divisions, accusing me of trying to destroy the family's good name. Cousins argued, screamed accusations at each other, tearing at the fabric of our seemingly united family, revealing fault lines we never knew existed. Old resentments, long buried, resurfaced under the new, harsh light of this profound historical injustice. Bitter divisions instantly formed, leaving a fractured landscape of relationships, some irreparable, others clinging on by a thread. The aftermath was a long-term fallout, a slow-motion unraveling. Family gatherings became awkward, strained silences punctuated by simmering resentment, often ending abruptly. Some chose sides, retreating into their own interpretations of the truth, demonizing others. Others retreated entirely, unable to cope with the shattered facade, the crushing weight of their inherited history. It was heartbreaking to witness the fracturing of what I had always considered an unbreakable bond, knowing I was the catalyst. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was also a glimmer of painful, morbid relief. The truth, however devastating, was finally out. The silence had been broken, allowing the festering wound of control and hidden shame to begin, however slowly, to breathe, to heal. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin wasn't in a single dramatic climax, but in the slow, agonizing unraveling of a family myth, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable, yet ultimately liberating reality. This wasn't the end of our struggle. It was merely the bitter beginning of true healing, a journey that would redefine what family truly meant and demand a deeper look at inherited responsibility. The cracks in our family's foundation were now exposed, demanding rebuilding, piece by agonizing piece. The fragmented reality of our family, exposed by the truth, weighed heavily, but amidst the disarray, a singular, haunting question remained. Elias, the profound injustice he suffered, the brutal destruction of his love with Clara, the decades of his forced absence from her life, weighed heavier on my conscience than any family feud. How could we possibly begin to truly heal if we didn't attempt to atone for the original sin, to find the man whose life had been irrevocably altered by our great grandparents. Tyranny? This was my mini hook. A desperate yet hopeful quest for an individual who had become the silent victim, a living symbol of crushed love and stolen dreams. My search for Elias was a painstaking, often disheartening process. Decades had passed. Names change, lives move on, and paper trails fade. I pored over old musical society archives, concert programs, census records, and even posted on obscure online forums for musicians from that era, throwing messages into the void. Leo, with his practical research skills, became an invaluable ally, tracing fragmented, barely there leads. Lily, with her inherent optimism, kept our spirits up through every dead end. We were driven by a collective sense of purpose, not just for Clara's memory, but for the wronged Elias, for the sake of true justice for their lost love. The process was agonizingly slow, frustrating. Days stretched into weeks, then months, filled with unanswered emails, cold calls met with silence, and the dispiriting comfort of archived data that offered no current paths. Doubt, a subtle, insidious whisper, tried to creep in. Was he even still alive? Had his spirit been broken? Would he even want to be found by the descendants of those who destroyed his happiness? Had our family's shadow extended so far, so completely, that even hope was an illusion? But then, the twist, a blinding flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness, a moment that made my breath catch. An unexpected reply from a small, independent music conservatory in a distant city. A former student, now an elderly professor, remembered an E. Thorne, a brilliant, reclusive musician who had taught there decades ago. And incredibly, a forwarding address still listed. My heart leaped, a violent surge of adrenaline replacing the weariness. This wasn't a ghost hunt anymore. This was real, tangible, breathtaking. Elias was out there, his life lived, despite the injustice, despite the silence. The K-letter 1ECBCH tin escalated as the abstract victim became a tangible person, a name with an address, and the immense, terrifying weight of our potential atonement became overwhelming. A surge of protective energy, a fierce sense of compassion, coursed through me, hardening my resolve. My personal view on this had solidified into an unshakable conviction. Control, especially when born of arrogance and social fear, ultimately inflicts its own insidious, soul-crushing form of cruelty. It leaves victims unseen, unheard, their dreams shattered, their love stolen, their pain lingering in the shadows for generations. I composed a letter, carefully, respectfully, pouring my heart into every word, explaining our family's painful journey, Aunt Beatrice's profound regret, and our desperate hope to offer understanding and, if possible, amends. It was a silent conversation between generations, across decades, united by a shared history of profound hurt. This was no longer just about family secrets. It was about human connection, about the courage to face uncomfortable truths, about offering a chance at closure where there had only been omission, only erasure. The air around me felt charged, not with dread, but with a palpable sense of urgent purpose. The path forward was clear, daunting beyond measure, but filled with the unwavering conviction that finding Elias, truly seeing him, was the only way to begin mending the broken pieces of our shared, tragic history. The echoes of a stolen love demanded a voice, and Elias deserved to be heard. The letter, dispatched into the vast unknown, felt like a desperate plea cast upon stormy seas. Days turned into agonizing weeks, each moment punctuated by the crushing silence of anticipation. We knew Elias owed us nothing. His life had been irrevocably altered by our great-grandparents' tyranny, and the idea of him rejecting our outreach, closing that fragile door forever, was a very real, very painful possibility. This was the mini hook, the terrifying vulnerability of reaching out after decades of forced separation, the unknown answer hanging heavy in the air, determining not just Elia's future, but our own family's capacity for redemption and true understanding. Then a small, unassuming package arrived. No fanfare, no dramatic flourish, just a simple, beautifully carved wooden music box. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. Inside, a tiny note, some melodies once silenced echo forever. Thank you for listening. It was unsigned, but the craftsmanship, the quiet dignity of the message spoke volumes. This was the twist. Not a dramatic reunion, but a subtle, deeply profound acknowledgement, a testament to his enduring spirit and his capacity for quiet understanding. The K letter 1 ECBCH tin here was internal, the slow, cautious, almost reverent dance of two souls finally connecting across a vast chasm of injustice, moving beyond anger to a fragile, shared peace. Over the next few months, our connection with Elias blossomed in a unique way. We exchanged more letters, raw and honest, filled with details of Clara's life, her enduring love for music. He, in turn, sent us recordings of his compositions, hauntingly beautiful pieces that spoke of yearning and resilience. There was no instant forgiveness, no magical erasure of the past, but there was understanding. We confessed Aunt Beatrice's anguish, her lifelong regret, and the immense pressure she faced from her parents. Elias, in turn, shared the crushing depth of his own pain, the confusion of his youth, the profound loss of Clara, and the eventual, hard-won acceptance of a life he hadn't chosen. The conversations were raw, difficult, profoundly healing, and laced with a bittersweet ache for the years lost. The path to reconciliation, both with Elias and within our own fractured family, was agonizingly nonlinear. Some relatives, unwilling or unable to face the harsh realities of great-grandparents, actions, or Aunt Beatrice's decades of silence, chose to remain estranged, their denial a shield. The wounds were too deep, the betrayals too personal for some to ever bridge. But for many, including Aunt Beatrice herself, who now openly spoke of Clara and Elias and her profound remorse, a tentative, fragile healing began. The process of understanding the full truth of the past became a collective family mission, a shared act of atonement, a slow dismantling of old prejudices and controlling impulses. We pooled resources, gathered more stories, pouring our collective energy into understanding the nuances of historical control and supporting each other through the raw emotions. There was a quiet dignity in this shared purpose, a sense that we were not just seeking individual justice, but seeking our own collective redemption. This painful journey led to unexpected connections, to a deeper, more honest understanding of each other, stripped of pretense. We learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about acknowledging the pain, accepting the imperfections, and choosing to rebuild, one fragile brick at a time, creating something more resilient, more authentic. The fragile hope, now tinged with ongoing grief for the lost dreams and the damage done, led us toward tentative steps forward, creating deepened connections forged in the crucible of shared, hard-won truth. The journey was not about erasing the past, but about bravely facing it, accepting its scars, and slowly, painstakingly, moving towards a future built on honesty and true understanding. The echoes of shattered dreams had finally given way to a symphony of healing, redefining the very meaning of family. Years passed, marked by quiet progress and the slow, arduous work of healing. The final chapters of this story unfolded not with a grand, dramatic flourish, but with the gentle, profound cadence of lives lived honestly. The culmination of our long journey wasn't about retrieving a lost object or fixing every past wrong perfectly. Instead, it was about retrieving something far more valuable, our family's truth, and with it, a chance at genuine connection, understanding, and a pathway towards true atonement. Elias, though he remained reclusive, found a quiet peace in the acknowledgement. He continued to send us his music, compositions that whispered of lost love, but also of enduring beauty, a testament to the resilience of his spirit even after decades of forced separation. This was the quiet justice finally served, a profound sense of relief and calm washing over our family as the burden of the secret lifted. Our journey had transformed us. Aunt Beatrice, freed from the immense weight of her secret, became a quiet advocate for empathy and true freedom within family bonds, sharing Clara's story in intimate ways, teaching us the insidious nature of control. Lily found her voice, becoming a passionate advocate for honesty and open communication within families, carrying Clara's lessons forward, ensuring no other family member would suffer in silent despair. Leo, with his pragmatic approach, helped us navigate the complex emotional landscape, fostering understanding where bitterness might have grown, anchoring our efforts towards healing. For me, the meaning of inheritance had expanded far beyond possessions. It was the inheritance of truth, of resilience, of the complex, flawed, yet enduring power of family. It highlighted the deeper meaning of the inheritance, not just in what was given, but in what was learned, endured, and ultimately healed. This story, our story, became a profound thought, a lasting lesson. It taught us that silence, especially when born of fear of judgment or misguided control, can be a heavy burden, a destructive force that poisons generations, leading to devastating misunderstandings, irreparable rifts, and the crushing of individual spirits. But honesty, however painful, holds the power to liberate, to heal, and to forge stronger, more authentic bonds. The true legacy isn't in what's hidden, but in the courage to reveal, to acknowledge, and to mend. It's about recognizing that every family has its shadows, but it's in bringing those shadows into the light that we find our true strength, redefining what it truly means to be a family. The old diary in the attic was never just a book. It was a testament to a vibrant life, once brutally controlled, now finally allowed to speak, allowing our family to begin to truly live authentically and with purpose. Thank you for listening to the old diary in the attic. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more real stories from the past. Until next time, remember that the most profound lessons are often found in the quietest corners of our shared human experience. A farewell.